Tenants are a segment of the business. For example, a tenant might be a site, location, or line of business. On the Tenants tab, you can access and configure all of the settings for each tenant. Let's take a look at the settings you can modify for each tenant. Find the tenant you'd like to modify and click Edit. General information. In this section, you can edit or add the tenant name, address, and contact information. Provisioning credentials. For extra device security, you can add provisioning credentials here. This requires every device under this tenant to log in with these credentials before receiving configuration. Whitelist IPs. To further protect and secure your account, you can set a tenant-specific list of IP addresses or host names that devices can provision from. This also applies to API requests. If a request comes into Phonism for a device in that tenant but does not originate from one of the whitelisted IP addresses, the request is denied. Please note, if authentication allowed outside whitelist is enabled and tenant credentials are being used, this does not apply. Here is where you configure whitelist IPs for a tenant. Modify the following fields as needed. Your current IP address, the IP address of the device you're accessing this page with. Enable whitelist. The default setting is off. To enable, toggle on. Authentication required for whitelist IPs. The default setting is off. Toggle to require the phone to authenticate using the tenant username and password. When the IP whitelist is enabled, requests from within the whitelist must authenticate with the provisioning credentials for the tenant. If provisioning credentials are not set, the request is denied. Authentication allowed outside whitelist. The default setting is off. When the IP whitelist is enabled, requests from outside the whitelist are allowed if the device successfully authenticates with the provisioning credentials for this tenant. If provisioning credentials are not set, the request is denied. IP addresses and host names. Enter a list of IP addresses, host names, and notes for each record. These IP addresses will be whitelisted. You only need to enter either the IP address or the host name for the entry. The system auto-resolves your host names to the correct IP address. Warnings. Host names are auto-resolved on a periodic basis so that dynamic DNS entries are handled properly. IP range or CIDR notation are not currently supported. DNS SRV is not currently supported.